There are moments when a person looks at their own life and feels like a visitor, as if the days unfolding around them belong to someone else, someone braver, louder, more certain. There is a quiet tragedy in that sensation. Not loud enough to be named, not sharp enough to be treated, but persistent enough to shape the way a person breathes. It begins subtly. A hesitation when speaking, an instinct to shrink, a sense that every space they enter was built for others. Over time, the feeling grows roots, convincing them they are merely passing through their own story rather than living it. This documentary explores that invisible displacement, why it appears, how it hides within the mind, and what it reveals about the human need to belong. It rarely begins with a dramatic moment. More often, it arrives in soft, nearly invisible ways, so subtle that a person might overlook it for years. The feeling that they are not fully living their own life, that they are present, yet somehow peripheral. Sometimes it surfaces in a conversation where their words feel too fragile to offer, or in a room where others move effortlessly while they shrink into the quiet edges. There is no announcement, just a gentle withdrawal, like someone stepping backward into the shadowed part of a photograph. It can appear when a person hears their own laughter and does not recognize it, when their reflection looks familiar but distant, as if belonging to someone they used to know. It can emerge while they are washing dishes, walking home, or sitting among friends, ordinary moments that suddenly feel slightly off-center, like the world is happening around them and they are watching it through softened glass. The mind notices before the voice does, a small breath held without meaning to, a pause before entering a room, a quiet wish to be invisible, followed by an even quieter fear that they already are. They start speaking in smaller portions, offering less of themselves in each interaction. Their sentences become shorter, edited down before reaching the air. They choose seats where they cannot be easily noticed, and gradually they begin to move through life like a guest, trying not to inconvenience the space they occupy. There is a gentleness in people who feel this way, but also a sorrow that goes unnamed, a subtle ache of living just outside themselves. They may still show up, fulfill responsibilities, smile at the right moments, carry conversations when needed. But something in them feels disengaged, as though they are performing a version of who they are meant to be. The tragedy is not that they feel unwelcome. The tragedy is that they believe the feeling is normal. Years of small compromises teach them to adapt, to blend in, to not disturb the atmosphere, to shape themselves around others' needs until they forget the outline of their own. And yet, beneath all of this, there is a quiet awareness, persistent and patient, a sense that something is missing, not in the world, but internally. A longing not to become someone new, but simply to return to themselves. This moment of recognition often appears in stillness, when the noise of daily life temporarily softens, and they are left alone with their own presence. In that silence, they might feel a sudden distance from their own thoughts, as if listening to a stranger narrate their inner world. Or they may feel a heaviness in the chest, an inexplicable sadness that doesn't ask for explanation, only acknowledgement. The realization is not loud. It is not a cry for help. It is a quiet truth. Somewhere along the way, they stopped feeling at home within themselves. For some, this truth feels blurry, a vague sense of detachment. For others, it is sharp, a clear recognition of internal exile. But for all, it carries the same weight, the unsettling sense that their life continued to move forward while they somehow stayed behind. Still, noticing is important. Recognition is a kind of doorway, the first fragile opening toward understanding, because a person cannot return to themselves until they realize they have drifted. And so this chapter lingers here, in the beginning, where the awareness first surfaces, where a person sees the distance, even if they do not yet understand it, where they sense the misalignment, though they cannot yet name its cause. The story of feeling unwelcome in one's own life does not begin with a loud event. It begins with a whisper, a subtle shift in the way a person inhabits their own existence, a moment where they look inward and realize they have been standing at the edges of their own story, waiting for permission to enter. The distance rarely begins in adulthood. It begins in the quiet corridors of early life, where a person learns the unspoken rules of being, where the atmosphere of a home, a school, or a relationship quietly teaches them how much space they are allowed to occupy. Children do not question these lessons. They absorb them. They internalize what is modeled, what is rewarded, and what is ignored. And in the process, they begin building the architecture of their own identity, brick by brick, belief by belief. Sometimes the lesson is direct, shaped by sharp words or strict expectations. More often, it is subtle. A sigh when they speak too loudly, a dismissal when they voice an emotion, a look of disappointment when they express something inconvenient. Children learn quickly which parts of themselves earn warmth, which parts earn silence, which parts invite disapproval, and so they begin trimming themselves, smoothing the edges, shrinking the parts that feel too loud or too tender, not because they want to, but because it feels safer. There is an ache in that early reshaping, an ache that continues long after they've forgotten where it began. But the body remembers. The mind remembers. The heart remembers. For some, the roots lie in a household where emotions were seen as disruptions, a place where sensitivity was misunderstood as fragility. For others, the roots lie in environments where excellence was the currency of love. Childhood becomes a stage where mistakes feel costly and authenticity feels dangerous. Then there are those who grew up in quiet homes, places where everyone kept to themselves, not out of cruelty, but simply out of habit. In such environments, a child may learn that being unseen is normal, even expected. They practice disappearing long before they understand what they are losing. There are also children who carry responsibility too early, children who learn to mediate conflict or absorb tension, children who grow into caretakers instead of being cared for. These children develop a mature kind of silence, an instinct to manage others' emotions before acknowledging their own. Over time, the self becomes divided. There is the version shaped by expectation, and the version that quietly hides beneath it. That hidden version becomes faint, a soft outline buried beneath years of adaptation. And as a person grows older, they may not even notice that they are living from the outer layer, not the core. When they look back, the origins may seem distant, foggy, or unimportant, but the emotional imprint remains, not through blame, but through understanding. No one escapes childhood untouched. Every person inherits patterns, some protective, some limiting. Feeling unwelcome in one's own story often begins with learning that parts of oneself are unwelcome in the world. Not explicitly, but through repetition, through the countless small moments where expression meets resistance, where presence meets indifference, where vulnerability meets misunderstanding. A child who repeatedly senses that their natural self creates disruption learns to believe that they must become smaller to be safe. A child who feels their needs are burdensome learns to suppress those needs before anyone notices them. A child who watches others define the emotional landscape learns to stand silently at its edges. That silence grows with them. It becomes the foundation of the distance they will later feel. An internal gap so familiar it becomes invisible. But understanding the origin is not about regret or accusation. It is about clarity, recognition, tracing the thread from the past to the present, not to blame anyone, but to understand the map of the self. Because the distance does not appear out of nowhere. It is built over time, constructed from invisible patterns, repeated messages, and a history of learning when to step back. And only by acknowledging where it began can a person begin to understand where they lost themselves and what it might mean to return. To feel unwelcome in one's own life is not a flaw of character. It is the outcome of a complex psychological process, one the mind constructs slowly, often to protect the person who lives inside it. At its core, identity is shaped through belonging. Human beings develop a sense of self by mirroring the emotional responses of early caregivers, communities, and relationships. But when those mirrors return inconsistent reflections, warmth one moment, coldness the next, the mind adapts in ways it believes are necessary to survive. Self-exile begins as safety. The psyche learns to distance itself from experiences that feel overwhelming, confusing, or invalidated. When emotions are dismissed, the mind numbs them. When needs are criticized, the mind buries them. When authenticity is punished, the mind masks it. These strategies feel subtle in the moment, but they become structural over time. What started as defense eventually becomes identity. Psychology calls this self-alienation, a state where the inner self feels disconnected from the outer self. A person senses a gap between who they are and who they present to the world. They become both actor and observer, participating in life while standing emotionally outside of it. Attachment theory offers further understanding. When children receive inconsistent emotional responsiveness, they learn to distrust their internal experience. They question their feelings, they doubt their perceptions, they wonder if their needs are legitimate. This uncertainty follows them into adulthood, manifesting as hesitation, overthinking, or a persistent fear of being too much. Cognitive distortions reinforce these patterns, believing others' needs always outweigh their own, assuming their presence is a burden, expecting rejection before any has occurred, interpreting neutral moments as evidence of inadequacy. Self-exile thrives on these distortions, not because they are true, but because they feel familiar. There is also the concept of introjected object relations, the internalized beliefs a person carries from early relationships. If a child repeatedly hears, directly or indirectly, that their emotions inconvenience others, they internalize that message as truth. The external voice becomes an internal voice. Eventually, the internal voice becomes the narrator of their story. Even neurobiology participates in this process. Chronic emotional suppression alters the pathways of stress response, making retreat feel soothing and visibility feel threatening. The brain learns that silence equals safety. It reinforces avoidance as comfort, even when avoidance leads to loneliness. But the most profound contributor is shame, quiet, unspoken, deeply embedded. Shame tells a person that their authentic self is unworthy. It pushes them away from their own desires, their own voice, their own identity. It becomes the invisible barrier between who they are and who they allow themselves to be. When shame settles in, the mind begins rewriting its own narrative. You do not belong. You are too much. You should stay small. You should not disturb the world. Over time, these messages become so internalized that a person no longer questions them. They simply live by them. That is the psychology of self-exile. A mind trying to protect itself from rejection by preemptively rejecting parts of itself. And yet, beneath all the layers of adaptation, something remains untouched. A quiet desire to belong, not to others, but to oneself. Self-exile may be constructed through fear, but the longing for return is built into human nature. The mind, even in its retreat, remembers the shape of home. When a person finally becomes aware of the distance within themselves, something unexpected happens. They resist coming closer. It seems paradoxical, longing for belonging, yet fearing it, wanting to reclaim their own story, yet shrinking from its pages. But the resistance is not irrational. It is protective. The mind fears what it does not trust. And when a person has spent years, perhaps decades, distancing themselves from their own emotions, returning to them feels like stepping into unfamiliar territory. Inside, there is a tension between two opposing forces. The part that longs to be known, and the part that fears the consequences of being seen. This conflict shows up in everyday moments. A person hesitates to express a feeling, even to themselves. They avoid situations where vulnerability might emerge. They dismiss compliments because accepting them feels unsafe. They downplay desires, dreams, and anger alike. Authenticity feels dangerous, even though exile feels painful. Psychology calls this approach-avoidance conflict, the emotional push and pull between wanting closeness and avoiding it. This conflict forms because the nervous system remembers the emotional cost of being open. It recalls the moments when vulnerability met rejection, when honesty met conflict, when visibility met judgment. The body stores these experiences. It reacts to safety and danger long before the mind understands why. So even when a person consciously wants to step into their own life, a quiet internal alarm cautions them to stay hidden. It's safer to remain on the edges. It's easier not to try. Don't risk being hurt again. Resistance also grows from guilt. Many people feel they have no right to want more space in their own story. They minimize their suffering. They compare themselves to others. They tell themselves that their longing is selfish or unreasonable. But guilt is not an accurate compass. It is merely an echo of old conditioning. Then there is the fear of identity disruption. Self-exile may be painful, but it is familiar. It provides structure. It offers predictability. To return to one's authentic self means rewriting patterns that have defined a lifetime. It requires confronting emotions long buried. It means acknowledging desires that once felt forbidden. And such transformation feels frightening, even if it leads to freedom. There is also a subtler fear. The fear of being wrong about oneself. What if the self they have hidden away is not who they hoped it was? What if authenticity reveals imperfections, contradictions, or unmet grief? So the mind resists. Not because it wants to stay distant, but because it wants to stay safe. But this resistance is not the end of the story. It is a necessary part of the journey. It signals that something meaningful is shifting within. Because resistance only appears when a person begins to move, however slowly, toward themselves. It is the friction that precedes change, the hesitation that precedes understanding, the protective instinct that appears right before a breakthrough. The presence of resistance does not mean the person is failing. It means they are finally close enough to the truth that their defenses feel the need to rise. The inner battle is not between right and wrong, strength and weakness, courage and cowardice. It is simply the mind trying to reconcile two contradictory truths: the desire to belong and the fear of what belonging might require. And inside that conflict lies the beginning of transformation. Change rarely arrives with fanfare. It comes instead in the form of a quiet shift, something small enough to miss, yet powerful enough to alter the course of a life. For many, the turning point appears unexpectedly, in a moment of stillness, in a conversation that touches a deeper place, in a feeling that rises without warning. Sometimes it's a realization that the sadness they carry is not shameful, just unspoken. Other times it's the first time they tell someone the truth about how detached they feel, and discover that the world does not collapse when they speak it. The turning point may be gentle, a breath taken without the usual tightness, a decision to stay in the room instead of withdrawing, a moment of noticing that they laughed without rehearsing the sound. These moments do not fix everything. They do not rewrite history, but they create a crack in the internal wall, just enough light to make the person wonder whether more might be possible. Psychologically, this shift is known as affective insight, a moment when understanding becomes embodied, where a person not only grasps the pattern intellectually, but feels its truth in their body. It is the moment the mind realizes that what once protected them may now be confining them. With this recognition, the internal narrative begins to soften. The voice that once insisted on staying small becomes quieter. The belief that they must distance themselves to be safe loosens its grip. Awareness creates possibility. Not immediate change, but potential. The turning point often brings grief. As a person begins to see themselves more clearly, they may mourn the years spent in exile. They may mourn the version of themselves that never had the chance to breathe fully. Grief in this context is not a setback. It is an opening. It allows the person to honor the pain they once avoided. It gives them permission to acknowledge the parts of themselves they hid. It helps them understand that their distance was not failure, but survival. And in that understanding, something begins to shift. They start noticing moments of presence, fleeting but real. They feel glimpses of self-acceptance, brief but grounding. They hear the softness in their own thoughts, a quiet reassurance they once believed impossible. The turning point is not a declaration. It is not a transformation. It is a recognition. Maybe I do belong here. Maybe I deserve to take up space in my own life. The moment does not erase the fear, but it introduces a counterweight, a new internal voice that whispers, "What if there is another way?" And for the first time, the person listens. The shift is subtle but profound. Not a leap, but a leaning. Not a solution, but a start. It marks the transition from exile to possibility, an acknowledgement that their story may still hold room for them. That the distance they felt is not a verdict, but a condition that can change. And it marks the moment when a person begins, however quietly, to turn back toward themselves. Returning to oneself is not a dramatic transformation. It is a gradual, uneven, deeply human process. A gentle reintroduction to the parts of the self that were once hidden away. In the beginning, the return feels fragile. A person experiments with being present. They allow themselves to feel emotions they once avoided. They speak truths they previously swallowed. Each small act of authenticity feels like walking on new ground. Psychologically, this stage resembles integration, the merging of the authentic self with the adapted self. It involves reclaiming pieces that were suppressed, desires, boundaries, vulnerabilities, dreams. Not to force change, but to make space for the full emotional landscape of the human experience. The return begins with noticing. Noticing when they shrink. Noticing when they silence themselves. Noticing when they feel the urge to step back from their own life. With noticing comes curiosity, not judgment, not blame, just quiet observation. This curiosity opens a door. What would happen if I stayed? If I spoke? If I allowed myself to feel? Sometimes the return brings discomfort. Old fears reappear. Old narratives whisper familiar doubts. But now the person recognizes these patterns. They see them instead of becoming them. The nervous system slowly learns new rhythms. Emotional expression becomes less threatening. Vulnerability becomes less foreign. Presence becomes less overwhelming. Integration is not linear. There are days of clarity followed by days of retreat. Moments of courage followed by moments of fear. But each return, no matter how small, strengthens the person's sense of belonging. They begin to rediscover their preferences, their needs, their boundaries. They honor them, not loudly, but quietly, consistently. They may find themselves revisiting memories that once shaped their distance. But instead of reliving them, they observe them with compassion. They understand the child or the younger self who learned to hide. They offer that self the acceptance they did not receive. The return is also marked by embodiment. A person feels at home in their breath, in their posture, in the way they move through the world. The body no longer tightens at the thought of being seen. Gradually, the internal world becomes less divided. The parts that were once exiled begin to rejoin the whole. Not perfectly, not completely, but steadily. Returning to oneself means allowing space for imperfection, for complexity, for contradiction. It means understanding that belonging is not a destination. It is an ongoing relationship with one's own humanity. And slowly, quietly, the person begins to inhabit their story from the inside, not the edges. They stop asking whether they are worthy of being here. They begin to sense that they always were. As the journey unfolds, something gentle becomes clear. A person cannot be a stranger in their own story forever. The human spirit, even when hidden, continues to reach toward itself. In this final chapter, the perspective widens, the narrative slows, the emotional landscape settles into a quiet understanding. A person who once felt unwelcome in their own life begins to feel the faint outline of home within themselves. Not a perfect home, not a constant home, but a familiar one. They understand now that belonging is not something granted by others. It emerges from within, through honesty, compassion, and the willingness to inhabit one's own truth. The world has not changed, but their relationship with themselves has. Where there was once self-doubt, there is gentleness. Where there was shame, there is understanding. Where there was distance, there is presence. They no longer narrate their life from the sidelines. They participate, they engage, they experience, and the story they once felt unworthy of becomes a story that unfolds through them, not around them. The quiet tragedy of exile transforms into a quiet triumph of return, not loud, not grand, but deeply human. This transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about reclaiming who has always been there, waiting beneath the layers of adaptation and fear. And that is the truth the journey reveals. Home is not a place. It is an inner alignment. It is the soft acceptance that one's emotions, needs, and presence belong in the world. The story that awaits is not a story of perfection. It is a story of inhabiting life fully, even when it feels uncertain. It is a story of authenticity, vulnerability, and the simple act of being here. In the end, the person does not become someone else. They simply become themselves. Finally, and without apology, they stand in the center of their own narrative. They breathe without hesitation. They speak without shrinking. They feel without fear. And in that quiet, profound moment, they understand. They were never unwelcome. They were simply waiting to return.